Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1975 historical epic, Barry Lyndon. Now, I have to be honest here, folks. As soon as I saw the runtime of this film, which was 3 hours and 5 minutes, I was leery of this movie. And I can also say that after finally seeing the film all the way through until the end, this was not my cup of tea. The length definitely didn't do it any favors because I felt it was just over long and unnecessarily long. Like, this isn't a film that really needed to be as long as it was because the story that it was telling was not engaging enough or didn't really have enough parts to it that even warranted this extended amount of runtime. But there are some things to admire about it. And it's one of those films where I did ultimately not care for it, but there are things about it that I did appreciate and honestly liked quite a bit. But before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on Barry Lyndon, I would like to give a special shout out yet again to Leon for requesting another review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. Link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Barry Lyndon is directed by Stanley Kubrick, and his direction in this is quite the feat. Like, I think he did a phenomenal job directing this movie. As with a lot of other Kubrick films, like the attention to detail is incredible. The way that he frames his shots, the way that he utilizes different camera techniques is exemplary. Um, Especially when it comes to how he shot so many scenes with natural light. It's a film that honestly, visually, it can be quite dazzling at points when it comes to showcasing the setting, whether it's in England or Prussia or Ireland. Uh, the way that he shot some of the few bits of action that you do get in the film, as well as just a lot of other moments visually that definitely do stand out. A lot of great wide shots in this, and some good usage of zooms at points and tighter shots. There are some stodgy moments in terms of the direction where it can get a bit too similar when it comes to one shot from the next. But for the most part, I think he did a really good job. I think it's a beautiful looking film. In a lot of ways, there are shots in this that are a straight up work of art, and the remaster by Criterion is an absolutely stunning remaster. Like, there are shots in this that look like it was a film that was shot yesterday, and this film came out in 1975. So Kubrick at the time, he was already a visionary, and now like his visual style and flair is just timeless because it hasn't aged at all. It's, if anything, it's aged like a fine wine. Now, as mesmerizing and high quality as the direction by Kubrick is for Barry Lyndon, the screenplay is nowhere near the same level. I don't know if it's the limitations of the source material or just what Kubrick himself brought to the table when it comes to the screenplay, but whatever it is, this is not a good script. And I know I'm probably going to get a bunch of people throwing rocks at me, shooting me with muskets, doing God knows what, typing up how I don't know what I'm talking about. Oh, you just don't get it. And that's fine, but I'm gonna stick by my guns here. This is a bad script. The reason for that is not solely because of the fact that Barry Lyndon is a bad character in terms of his nature and his character as a person. That doesn't help, but him being an unlikable protagonist isn't necessarily the biggest ill or the biggest problem that this script has. The biggest problem that this script has is that it's overlong and padded to an extreme degree. There is not enough in this script when it comes to the overall plot or the characterization to warrant 3 hours. There isn't enough there. It's a story about a gold digger. That's basically what it is. Barry Lyndon is a gold digger. He um, was in love with his cousin, which is creepy and weird just from the start. That doesn't work out, and he winds up leaving his hometown. He gets robbed along the way, but then he winds up joining the military, the English army. He gets involved in some battles. He then gets an opportunity to steal an officer's coat and their identification and become a deserter. He does that. He then winds up getting found out by this Prussian guy who is like a general in the Prussian army, who discovers that he's a deserter and then essentially blackmails him to be a part of his army. Then he goes from the Prussian army to being an acquaintance and a friend of a chevalier, this rich guy who is from Ireland. And he was put into his acquaintance by the Prussian general because the Prussian general wanted him to get some information on the chevalier, and he becomes friends with the Chevalier because he gives away his true identity as an Irishman. The Chevalier feels bad for him and sees a fellow countryman, and so they form a bond. The Chevalier teaches uh, Barry all these different tricks of the trade when it comes to gambling and stuff, dealing with high society and how to be a gentleman. And then he goes on and marries this rich woman named Lady Lyndon. That's how he gets the last name of Lyndon. He then uses her fortune for his own personal gain. He tries to become a lord, but fails miserably. He can't get along with his stepson. He winds up having a son of his own, but his son ends up dying tragically in a horse riding accident. He then winds up getting involved in a duel with his stepson, who returns after everything that has occurred in terms of the estate and it falling into disarray and into debt. And he challenges Barry to a duel, and he winds up shooting Barry in the leg. Barry loses a leg. Then he gets paid by his stepson and by his former wife 500 guineas a year to just fuck off and get out of England and go back to Ireland. And he does that. And that's it. That's all that happens in 3 hours. There's not enough there in terms of a story or characters or subtext or anything to warrant 3 hours of runtime. So I mean, that's the biggest issue with this script, and this is why I don't feel it's that good of a screenplay, because it's just excessively overlong and winded and bloated and in such an unnecessary fashion. There's at least an hour of this that could have been cut out entirely, and you wouldn't really miss a beat. You wouldn't really honestly have anything that is lost of any significant value. Cut out a lot of the dialogue. There's a lot of scenes where there's just so much dialogue that is completely unnecessary because it doesn't really add anything in terms of intrigue or anything in terms of extra information about what's going on in the plot, what little of it that there is. There are numerous scenes where not a lot happens. You don't need what seems like 4 different scenes of people signing notes for debts. Not needed. Cut that down. There's so much just extraneous. I don't know if extraneous is the right word, but there's just so much extra shit that doesn't even need to be in there. That just seems like it's there because Kubrick can't bring it upon himself to edit his own screenplay. And it's not like there's a lot of character depth to warrant this extended runtime either. and this long-winded nature of this script. Other than Barry Lyndon, there is no one else in this that really has any extensive character depth. There really isn't. It's not Lady Lyndon. It's not her stepson. I mean, her older son and Barry's stepson. It's not his son. It's not anyone who was a part of the Lyndon estate. It's not anyone that Barry meets along the way. It's not the Chevalier. It's not the general. It's not anyone. There is not a single character in this script that has honestly even close to half as much depth as Barry. So when you have all these characters and they have all this screen time and they have all this time that's devoted to them and they are incredibly one note and there's nothing to them other than the bare minimum, especially Lady Lyndon. Like there are scenes upon scenes of her just sitting there doing nothing except look pretty. I think maybe that's the point. She's supposed to be seen as like an object by the aristocrats in the high society because she's a woman and so on and so forth. But you don't need to keep hammering that point home, especially when that point is very obvious from the beginning. But yeah, there's just so much about the characterization other than Barry that is flat and dull and not interesting. And they don't delve into these characters and any sort of significant depth. And I said they, but he, as in Kubrick, doesn't do that. So it's another reason why you're just left scratching your head in terms of why this is as long as it is. And the story itself is just not that engaging or compelling throughout. It's somewhat interesting in the first hour and 40 something minutes prior to the intermission just to see what scenario and situation Barry is going to get into next and how he's going to get out of it. But once it just gets to the point where he marries Lady Lyndon, becomes Barry Lyndon, and spends all this money, tries to become a lord and fails, can't get along with his stepson and even abuses his stepson, then has a kid, tries to be a good father, but screws up and lets his kid have way too much and whatever he wants, and even gets him a horse. The kid then runs off, gets on the horse without his father being there, winds up falling and hitting his head, and then dies. And then he becomes an absolute useless drunk, and his stepson comes back, challenges him to a duel. He actually is willing to not fire what would have been a fatal shot to kill his stepson when his stepson screws up and fires the first shot accidentally, but his stepson still shoots him in the leg because it's not satisfying enough for him that Barry let him live. And that character in particular, they try to make this character into somebody who's kind of sympathetic in terms of Bullingdon, Lord Bullingdon, who is the son of Lady Lyndon, the first son. But it doesn't work because the guy, especially when he gets older, he just comes across as a selfish little prick who doesn't want to even give Barry a chance to be a father to him. He when he gets punished, it seems like he's being punished for a legitimate reason and not because he is just being punished because Barry's just choosing to abuse him out of nowhere. Now, when Barry snapped and started smacking the shit out of him in front of all these high elites after he made a spectacle during a concert, that's one thing. That was uncalled for, and that was a little bit, well, not a little bit, that was way too far. But at the same time, you don't look at that by like, yeah, you show him who's boss. No, it's one of those moments where like, can't you do this behind closed doors? Why do you have to be such a demonstrative bastard about this? And also drag his son into it too. Like just there's a whole thing where he makes his son wear his shoes and loudly clop into the room. Like he just comes across like a prick too. So there's really not a whole lot about him that makes you feel for him either. You somewhat sympathize with Lady Lyndon and you just wonder why she can't just get rid of Barry, but at the same time, this is a different time period, and women didn't really have that luxury of divorce, so she's just trapped with him. But that's like the only character you really sympathize with, to be honest. Anyone else you don't really give two shits about, don't care. Even his son, like I mean, Brian, like his son Brian is a spoiled brat, so it's like you don't even really that's definitely not something that helps this script either. Is that not only is there not a lot of depth to these side characters, but they're not likable either. So, or there's not enough there to even consider them to be much of a character in the first place. So there's no one you really connect with. There's no one you really root for. So that's another reason why this story just feels way over long, because there's nothing you really connect with on a deeper level. And another reason is there's not a lot that happens. There's a couple battle scenes, but the battle scenes aren't really that exciting. And I understand that's the way that things were back then. Let's just slowly march towards the enemy and fire, or the enemy will fire their gun as we're slowly marching towards them, and then a bunch of our men will get shot down, and then we'll keep marching forward. Like, there's only so much you can do with that kind of battle plan to make that exciting to watch. And then, other than that, like, what is there in terms of intrigue? What is there in terms of suspense? What is there in terms of tension? There really isn't any. Like, what? Oh, how is Barry gonna luck his way out of this next scenario? That only goes so far. How is Barry gonna find a way to not get shot by his stepson, like what happened previously in the last duel that he did? No, okay, all right. Was that unexpected? Not really at this point, because you know that his luck is eventually going to run out, and you see that the film is almost about over, so you're pretty dang sure that this is going to be the moment when his luck runs out, and it does. It just feels like a waste of time, and it feels like it's just such a frustrating story to watch unfold, because it unfolds slowly, and on top of that, it doesn't feel like it amounts to anything. It doesn't amount to anything substantial in the end. And then some people, well, that's the point, the emptiness and the vapidness and blah blah blah. And I get it, I understand all of these different points that people are trying to make about the subtext and the commentary and all this other shit. But at the end of the day, you have a story that's incredibly simple and straightforward, and it's 3 hours when it has no right to be whatsoever. And there's no reason to get connected with, or to really be any uh, sort of and there's no reason to be connected with or have any sort of deep emotional connection with any of the characters either. So it just becomes an absolute slog of a story and a film to sit through. And I will blame Kubrick for this. He wrote the script. It's his script. So he deserves the criticism, and I'm going to give him the full brunt of it. Now, the cast, though, I think is actually pretty good. That's another element of the film that I thought was actually pretty excellent. I think the narration, for instance, by Michael Hordon was amazing. I felt that it was a really great narration performance, really good vocal work by Michael Hordon. Ryan O'Neal, I his character is a character I don't like, but I liked his performance. I felt like he did a great job playing such an unsavory, unlikable character, and he showed the emotion that the character is supposed to show when he's dealing with grief. He showed fear when he needed to showcase that. He was believable when it comes to the scenes with him in combat, especially the moment when he gets in that bit of fisticuffs with that other soldier in the English army. Ryan O'Neal, I think he showed me a lot with this performance. Like, I honestly, I haven't been that impressed with him as an actor when it comes to a lot of the other films that I've seen him in. But I felt like this was actually a pretty impressive, pretty strong performance. Um, I just wish it was in a better film. I feel the same way about Patrick Magee as the Chevalier, or other actors like Hardy Krüger as Captain Pottsdorf, or Stephen Burkoff as Lord Ludd, or Leon Vitali as Lord Bullingdon. I thought he did a good job too playing that character. Marisa Berenson as Lady Lyndon. I mean, she's not really given much to do other than look pretty for the camera and say like maybe 5 lines of dialogue and sign some debt notes. But she does the best that she can with what she's given. Very limited role, but I still felt there was something about her and the way that she carried herself that I felt was actually quite good, especially when it comes to her showing how dead inside the character is, and the emotion of the character despite not really having much lines of dialogue. That's not an easy thing to do. And I actually did feel the emotion uh, emanating from her performance despite not actually hearing any dialogue. And there's other actors and actresses as well, like Murray Melvin, who plays Reverend Runt, Marie Keane as Belle, Barry's mother, or Gay Hamilton as Nora Brady, Godfrey Quigley as Captain Grogan. Like all of them did some good work and were rather authentic and quite good when it comes to their performances. So this does feature some good performances by the cast. And the cinematography is absolutely luxurious. It's lavish. It's beautiful. It matches Kubrick's visual style and flair really well. The editing by Tony Lawson, though, I think really could have been a bit punchier, a little bit less stodgy, a little bit less stiff, especially when it comes to a fair amount of sequences throughout the film. This could have used a better editor who could like trim some of the fat instead of just letting scenes drag out too long, like establishing shots or some of the other shots where there's no dialogue and there's nothing really happening, but let's like stretch it out for some reason. For instance, there's like multiple shots in this film with Lady Lyndon just sitting there in a chair or in a bathtub saying nothing, and it's stretched out way too long. So I think a lot of that could have definitely helped the film too. Would have helped the pacing a lot if the editing was tighter. And I do think it's got some good production values. Definitely has some nice production design and art direction and costuming. Definitely looks pretty authentic for the time period. And the score, which is mostly just classical music. In fact, the majority of it is classical music. I felt fit the film well. The main theme throughout is Sarabande, the main title by Handel. It's a beautiful piece of music, and the rendition of it by the National Philharmonic Orchestra is absolutely epic. The issue is that so much of the score in this becomes incredibly repetitive because it's just the same classical notes repeated over and over and over and over and over again throughout the majority of the film. And it's another reason why the film feels as long as it is, because there's not even like an added benefit of like a new musical piece or new score that accompanies the film or accompanies a particular scene that can pique your interest or make you go, oh, okay, that's a little bit something different. No, it's just the same thing over and over again for the most part. So even that isn't necessarily that great either, despite how great the rendition of Handel's music is. It is great, but it's not great enough to really honestly get beyond the point of tedium, because it's just so repeated and it's so repetitive throughout the entire film. Yeah, great music is great music, but if you overdo it, it's gonna get old. and you're not going to find it to be as great anymore. And that's exactly what happens with the score for Barry Lyndon. And that's honestly how I feel about the film, period. It's like, yeah, there are great things about this. The direction, some of the performances by the cast, the production design, the art direction, the costuming, some elements of the score. But there's only so much you can do in terms of having those elements and have them carry a 3 hour long movie. And they can't carry a 3 hour long film. You need to have a more compelling story, a better narrative. You need to have a more intriguing variety of characters with more depth. You need to have more than just the beautiful, pretty pictures in a coffee table book to make something truly special. And I think, honestly, there's a quote from a critic from the Los Angeles Times that sums up my feelings on this film perfectly. This is by Charles Champlin of the LA Times. He called Barry Lyndon the motion picture equivalent of one of those very large, very heavy, very expensive, very elegant, and very dull books that exist solely to be seen on coffee tables. It is ravishingly beautiful and incredibly tedious in about equal doses. A succession of salon quality still photographs. That is honestly precisely how I feel about this film. It paints a nice picture. It's really a gorgeous, beautiful film to look at on more than one occasion, but the story is not engaging or interesting or compelling enough to continually maintain your interest or your intrigue. And there's not really enough subtext or commentary to do that either. The characterization is not strong enough to make these visuals and these really exemplary, excellent elements of the film really click. It's just something that leaves you feeling very empty by the end and just feeling like you wasted 3 hours of your time sitting through it because there's not really much of a reward and there's not really much that you gain other than superficial elements from sitting down and watching 3 hours of Barry Lyndon. But that's just my personal take on the film. I know a lot of people are going to disagree. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.